In the endless corridors of the tambourine machine, where the glow of the fluorescent lamps was reflected on the gray walls, Andreas Graf wandered like a specter between machines and cubicles. Every step he took was a burden, every breath a struggle against the exhaustion that weighed on his shoulders like a lead blanket. His mind was a whirlpool of worries, a maze of dilemmas with no way out. Andreas wasn't just an exemplary tambourine machine employee. He was the backbone of the engineering team, the man everyone trusted to solve the most difficult problems. But behind the facade of competence and dedication, there was a broken man whose heart was torn apart by his son's illness. His son, Luca, was his light and his hope, but also his greatest source of pain. The leukemia that had settled on Luca's frail body was like a sinister shadow hanging over the Graf family, obscuring the future with its threatening presence. Andreas' every sleepless night was a silent testimony to his internal battle, a struggle between the duty to provide for his family and the desperate desire to be by his son's side in every precious moment. To make matters worse, a year earlier he had lost his wife, his companion for more than 10 years, suddenly gone, leaving behind only the pain of longing. Andreas had been in deep mourning all that time, broken only by the terrible news of his son's illness, which woke him up and brought him back to reality, not in a positive way, but by plunging him into even greater chaos. But he needed to be strong. He needed to feel and be strong for his son who depended on him, and he repeated this exhaustively. But dividing the work of the company with caring for him was sapping his strength. Even with the help he received from professionals in the field, it was still becoming an almost unbearable burden for him. The thought of losing his son made him feel terrible. As Andreas trudged through the sterile corridors of the company, his vacant gaze met the blank expressions of his co-workers, each absorbed in their own tasks and concerns. Life at Tambourine Machine was an alienated existence, where days merged into an indistinct mass of reports and meetings, and humanity was somehow completely swallowed up by the frenetic pace of production. But there was one place at Tambourine Machine where humanity still pulsed, a stronghold of compassion amidst the sea of indifference. The Human Resources Department room. There, around the polished mahogany conference table, the guardians of employee welfare gathered, each with their own story of sacrifice and redemption. Mr. Mahler, with his rigid posture and piercing gaze, was more than just the head of the department. He was a leader, a mentor, and, above all, a man of principle. Next to him, Roberta radiated a serenity that calmed restless souls, her blue eyes sparkling with genuine compassion for those who sought her help. In that room, where destinies intertwined and secrets were confided in whispers, Andreas Graf's life was about to change forever. What the future held for him and his sick son, only time could tell. Reaching the door to the Human Resources room, Andreas hesitated for a moment, his hand trembling as he turned the handle. With a heavy sigh, he pushed the door open and entered, setting in motion a series of events that would challenge his faith in humanity and reveal the true measure of a father's love. He had made up his mind a week ago, when his son suffered severe pains that caused him to convulse. He had been warned when Luca was already in hospital and had to rush off in the middle of a meeting with suppliers. That night at his son's bedside, he feared more than ever that he would lose him forever, and if that happened, he would never forgive himself. He cried his heart out all through the night in the hospital bed, and in the morning he had to leave it, holding back his tears so that his son wouldn't see. He mulled it over all day, thinking about the best solution, weighing up the pros and cons of each path before him. Finally, he had come to a painful conclusion. He would have to resign to look after Luca full-time. The thought of leaving behind his career at Tambourine Machine was daunting, but his son's health and well-being came first. So it was decided from then on, I would resign. He had spent the whole of last week rehearsing his resignation, and now it was there, in front of him. The Human Resources Department room was an oasis of calm amidst the frenetic chaos of Tambourine Machine. The soft light from the pendant lights bathed the cream walls, giving the room an aura of almost heavenly tranquility. In the center, the polished mahogany conference table seemed to invite the occupants to gather, as if they were discussing not just numbers and reports, but the very lives of the company's employees. Andreas Graf entered the room with hesitant steps, his expression charged with anxiety and expectation. His tired eyes scanned the room, meeting the familiar faces of his co-workers. Mr. Mahler, with his rigid posture and piercing gaze, and Roberta, whose serenity emanated a comforting calm. "Please sit down, Andreas," Roberta invited, her voice as soft as a morning breeze. "We're here to help you." Andreas sank into the offered chair, his mind spinning with a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. He felt like a castaway adrift in a sea of uncertainty, desperately searching for an anchor to hold him steady in the face of the tumultuous waves that threatened to engulf him. "Thank you for seeing me, Roberta, Mr. Mahler," Andreas began, his voice wavering with restrained emotion. "I know my situation is complicated, but I definitely don't know what else to do." Mr. Mahler leaned forward, his piercing eyes fixed on Andreas. "We are aware of the challenges you face, Andreas," he said, his voice firm and authoritative. "We want to help you find a solution that is beneficial to you in the company." Andreas nodded, a feeling of relief flooding his chest. It was comforting to know that he wasn't alone in his struggle, that there were people willing to lend a hand in his hour of need. But still, the doubts and fears persisted, like dark shadows that refused to go away. "My son Luca, Andreas choked on the words, his voice failing him at the intensity of his emotions. "He's fighting leukemia. Every day is a battle, a fight for life." Roberta reached out to support Andreas' hand, her blue eyes brimming with compassion. "We understand, Andreas," she said softly, "and we're here to help you find a way to balance your responsibilities as a father with your duties at the company." His heart was heavy with the certainty of his decision. He couldn't go on sacrificing time with Luca for the sake of a job that no longer meant as much as it used to. His mind was made up, but his heart was still squeezed by the pain of his imminent dismissal. "Understand, I want to resign. I really can't stay with the company any longer. I need to look after my son. And at the same time I'm here with my thoughts far away. It'll be better for both of us." Roberta and Muller looked at each other, and it was Mr. Muller who took the lead.
Unterstrich Graf?
"I think you weighed up this decision a long time ago, right?" "Understress, that's right. I've been thinking about it for a week, but I really can't do it anymore." I see. Muller continued. If that's what you really want. We'll get your paperwork in order, and then we'll contact you to terminate your relationship with the company." "Thank you. I thought you'd understand." Andreas left the company shaken. When he got home, he found Luca lying on his bed, pale and fragile as a leaf in the wind. His eyes lit up at the sight of his father, but the joy was short-lived, replaced by concern when he saw the gloomy expression on Andreas' face. "Dad, what happened?" Luca asked, her voice weak and shaky. Andreas sat on the edge of the bed, struggling to hold back the tears that threatened to overflow. "I need to talk to you, Luca," he began, his voice wavering with emotion. "I made a decision today at the company, a difficult one." Luca watched his father with eyes full of apprehension, his heart racing with a sense of foreboding. "I've decided to resign," Andreas confessed, the words coming out like a painful confession. "I'll be here with you all the time, son. From today, I won't leave your side." Luca's face paled even more, his body weakened by illness seeming to shrink at the news. "But Dad, what about your job? What about the money?" he asked, his voice trembling with fear. Andreas held Luca's hand tenderly, his own voice choked with tears. "I know, my love, but none of that matters if we don't have each other. I promise we'll find a way to get through this together. Everything will be fine. Don't worry, just focus on getting better, a little at a time." The two hugged, sharing the weight of their worries while clinging to the fragile hope of a better future. The next morning, Andreas woke up with a knot of anxiety tightening his stomach. He knew he would have to face the consequences of his decision at the company, but he was determined not to back down. He had chosen his son, and there were no regrets in his heart. He calmly prepared his breakfast, as well as his son's, eggs and toast, doing everything with a calmness that had been lost for a long time. As she ate breakfast next to Luca and laughed together, the phone rang, interrupting the quiet morning routine.
Andreas Answert.
"Hello?" he asked nonchalantly. "Hey, Andreas, this is Roberta from the Human Resources Department," came the familiar voice on the other end of the line. "Hello, Roberta. Is everything all right?" She asked with a certain tension in her voice. "We've given your situation some serious consideration," Roberta continued, her voice sounding calm and understanding. "Can you come to the company today? We need to discuss it in person." "Sure, I can. I'll be there soon." Thinking it was some kind of raise, he had already prepared the negatives. There was no money in the world that could buy it back. But at the same time, he was also thinking the worst. With his heart racing, Andreas Graf headed for the tambourine machine. Every step he took was a step towards uncertainty, but also towards the possibility of a new life, free from the chains that bound him to the past. As he entered the company's familiar building, Andreas was greeted by a tense silence, as if the gray walls were holding secrets and expectations. He climbed the stairs with renewed determination. When he reached the Human Resources Department room, Andreas found Roberta and Mr. Mahler waiting for him, their serious faces revealing the gravity of the situation. Andreas sat down in front of them, his fingers intertwined in his lap as he waited for them to tell him what they wanted. "Thank you for coming, Andreas," began Mr. Mahler, his voice sounding grave. "We have reviewed your situation carefully and considered your circumstances comprehensively." Andreas nodded, holding his breath as he awaited the final decision. "We are prepared to offer you paid leave," Roberta continued, her soft voice offering a glimmer of hope amid the gloom. You'll be able to look after your child without having to worry about financial matters. A wave of relief swept over Andreas, flooding him with a sense of gratitude and disbelief. He couldn't believe that the company was willing to make such a generous gesture, to extend a helping hand in his time of need. For a moment, he felt like he was dreaming, hoping to wake up and discover that it was all just a fleeting illusion. It's incredible, murmured Andreas, struggling to find the right words to express his gratitude. I don't know what to say. Thank you. Thank you so much. But how? How did you manage that? Mr. Mahler nodded, a small smile forming on his stern lips. You're a valued member of our team, Andreas, he said, and dearer than you can possibly imagine. We met with all the employees, and I'll tell you right now, the idea didn't come from us, but from them. Concerned about you and your son, they decided that all their paid leave will be given to you. That way you'll have more than enough time to look after your child, and you won't have to struggle financially. We want to ensure that you have the opportunity to put your family first. That's the least we can do. Roberta added. Andreas felt tears of gratitude bubbling up in his eyes as he stood up to shake the outstretched hands of Roberta and Mr. Mahler. It was a moment of renewal, a promise of change that he would embrace wholeheartedly. As he left the Human Resources office, his step was light, his shoulders lighter than they had been in a long time. He knew that there would still be challenges ahead, facing that terrible leukemia that would make the road ahead long and tortuous with his son. But now, he felt he had a support network to help him through the storms to come. As he left the HR office, everyone stood to greet him and wish his son well. Andreas couldn't hold back the tears and let them fall as he walked, entirely grateful for everyone there. As he left the tambourine machine that day, Andreas felt a new determination welling up in his chest, a flame burning bright and strong inside him. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. He would face the unknown head-on, with courage and hope guiding the way. When he told Luca the news, the boy hugged him, certain that together they could overcome any obstacle that stood in their way. Luca was cured of leukemia in less than a year, and Andreas returned to work feeling grateful for everyone there. Thank you very much to those who have supported the channel financially through the link in the comment pinned. This helps me to bring more and more stories to you. And don't forget to like and also subscribe to continue receiving the new stories.